My name is Martha. I'm 58 years old, and for the first time in my life, I think my heart actually stopped beating, just for a second. It happened on a quiet Tuesday evening. The kind that usually smells like warm soup and laundry detergent. I had just folded the last batch of towels when I heard laughter coming from the living room. Not just any laughter. Her laughter, my daughter's. I smiled at first, because that sound used to be my favorite thing in the world. But then, the words that followed twisted that smile into something else entirely. She's stubborn. I just wish she'd die already so I can finally sell that house. The sentence floated out through the half-closed door like smoke. Thick, toxic, unbelievable. My fingers loosened, and the towels slipped from my arms. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe she wasn't talking about me. But then I heard her laugh again, sharper this time, like glass cracking. No, really, you don't understand. She's holding on to that place like it's some sacred thing. It's falling apart. Once she's gone, I can finally breathe. My knees buckled. I grabbed the wall to keep from collapsing. The wallpaper, faded blue roses, dug into my palm. Gone. She said once she's gone, gone. My body went cold from the inside out. Every breath scraped my throat. That was my daughter, Lydia, my only child. The same little girl who used to kiss my cheek before school and whisper, "Love you, Mom, forever." And now she wanted me to die. I pressed closer to the door, barely breathing. Her voice was light, cheerful, like she was gossiping about a neighbor, not her own mother. "Yeah, the place will sell fast once I redo the kitchen. It's old, but it's got potential. I already talked to an agent. She'd already talked to an agent. I felt something inside me shatter quietly, like porcelain under a shoe. My legs started trembling, and I stumbled backward down the hall. The house creaked under my steps, betraying me with every sound. I reached my bedroom and shut the door, careful not to make a sound. Then I just stood there. The silence felt alive, pressing, watching. I looked around my room, at all the things I'd built my life around, framed photos of Lydia's graduation, her old ballet shoes hanging on the mirror, the quilt I made from her baby clothes. Each one suddenly felt poisoned. How many times had she smiled at me while secretly wishing I'd just disappear? My heart kept whispering, no, not her, not my daughter. But my mind repeated her words over and over, cruel and exact. I just wish she'd die already. I sank onto the edge of my bed. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. 1,000 memories started flooding back, tiny moments that suddenly didn't make sense anymore. The way she'd insisted on helping me with the bills lately. The sudden interest in fixing up the house. The sweet tone when she said, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of everything." Everything now looked like a carefully placed mask. I pressed my hands to my face and whispered, "What did I do? What did I do to deserve this?" But there was no answer. Only the soft ticking of the clock on the wall, each second stabbing at my chest. Then the phone rang. I froze. It rang once, twice. Then I heard her voice from downstairs, warm, fake, perfect. "Mom, dinner's ready." That voice, that same voice that just wished me dead. I didn't move. My throat was dry, my heart pounding so loud I thought she might hear it through the floor. "Mom? Did you hear me?" Her footsteps echoed in the hallway, slow and confident. I quickly wiped my face and stood up. My reflection in the mirror looked pale, hollow, and terrified. I forced a smile. It didn't reach my eyes. By the time she opened my door a crack, I was sitting on the bed, pretending to be calm. "There you are," she said, her tone sugary. "You okay? You looked tired earlier." I swallowed hard. "Just resting," I said, forcing my voice to sound steady. Her eyes flicked to the floor, then back to me. "Good, come on, dinner's getting cold," she smiled. That same smile that used to mean love. Now it looked like a mask. As she turned and walked away, I caught a glimpse of her phone in her hand. The screen lit up with a name. Evan. A real estate emoji. My stomach twisted. I followed her down the hallway like a ghost. every step feeling heavier than the last. The dining room smelled of roasted chicken and garlic, my favorite. She'd made it just the way I liked. She sat across from me, her face calm, her tone light. "So, how was your day, Mom?" I stared at her hands, steady, elegant, manicured. The same hands that used to hold mine crossing the street. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my plate at the wall and ask, "Why? Why would you say that?" But instead I smiled and said softly, "It was fine, sweetheart. Just a little tired." "You should rest more," she said, cutting into the chicken. "You've been doing too much lately." Her words sounded caring. But all I could hear underneath was that same cruel wish. I just wish she'd die already. The clock on the wall ticked. The silence between us stretched thin. I lifted my fork but couldn't eat. My mouth was too dry, my chest too tight. She glanced up, smiling sweetly. "You're quiet tonight." "Just thinking," I whispered. "About what?" I met her eyes. "About how quickly people can change." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" I forced another smile. "Oh, nothing, just a life." She laughed softly. "You always get sentimental after dinner." Her laughter cut through me. Every sound of it made me want to run, but I couldn't. Not yet, because right now I needed to know the truth. If she could pretend to love me at dinner after wishing me dead an hour ago, what else was she hiding? The fork slipped from my trembling hand and clattered on the plate. Her smile faltered for a split second. "Mom, you okay?" I nodded slowly, forcing the corners of my mouth up again. "Yes, I'm fine." But inside, I was screaming. Screaming so loud I thought my ribs would crack, because for the first time in my life, I was scared of my own daughter. And as her voice filled the room again, cheerful and calm, I realized something chilling. I would have to pretend through the rest of this dinner. Pretend nothing happened. Pretend I hadn't just overheard the most heartbreaking words of my life, because if I didn't, I wasn't sure what she might do next. That night after dinner, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice again, those awful words replaying like a broken record in my head. So I did what I always do when my mind refuses to rest. I went back to before. Before everything fell apart. Before that sentence shattered the little world I'd built. Back then, my life was simple, predictable in the most comforting way. I lived in the same little house my husband Henry and I bought 40 years ago. A small white cottage with green shutters and a porch that creaked when the wind blew too hard. Henry used to call it our forever home. He spent hours in his study by the window, his thinking room, he called it, surrounded by shelves of books and the faint smell of pipe tobacco. Even after he passed, I never changed a thing in there. His glasses still rested on his desk, a mug still half-stained with old coffee. I guess I kept it that way because it felt like if I disturbed anything, he might really be gone. The house carried his presence. Every creak, every corner whispered of our years together, and outside, the rose garden. My sanctuary. I'd wake up early before the sun had fully climbed the sky and kneel in the soil, feeling the cool earth beneath my hands. I talked to those roses like they were my friends. "Morning, darling," I'd whisper to the pink ones Henry planted for our anniversary. "You're blooming beautifully today." They were my pride, my proof that life, even in grief, could still grow. When Henry died, the house became too quiet. The silence echoed in ways that scared me. I used to fill it with the sound of the radio, just so I wouldn't have to hear my own breathing. Then one morning, there was a knock on the door. It was Lydia. "My girl." "Mom," she'd said, her eyes soft, voice trembling. "You shouldn't be alone right now." She moved back home for a while, to help with the bills and keep me company. I didn't even hesitate. Of course, I wanted her close. At first it felt like old times. We'd cook dinner together, sit on the porch at dusk, talk about nothing and everything. She'd tell me about her new job, her friends, her plans, and I'd listen, like I always did, my heart swelling with that familiar pride only a mother can feel. Sometimes she'd rest her head on my shoulder and whisper, "I don't know what I'd do without you, Mom," and I'd whisper back, "You'll never have to find out." Those were good days. When I think about Lydia's childhood, I remember warmth and laughter. She was the kind of child who ran barefoot through sprinklers, who sang to the radio off-key, who made me birthday cards that said things like, "You're my sunshine." When she fell off her bike at 7, she cried until I kissed the scrape on her knee. When she was 12, she baked cookies for the whole street, burned half of them, but insisted they tasted like love. Every milestone of her life is tattooed in my memory. Her first recital when her dress strap broke on stage and she looked at me terrified. I stood up in the crowd, mouthed, "You're okay." She smiled and finished her dance like nothing happened. When she graduated high school, Henry whispered, "She's got your heart, Martha," and I believed him. After Henry passed, Lydia started coming around more often. She said it was because she worried about me. "Mom, you shouldn't be alone so much," she'd say. "What if you fall? What if something happens?" At first, it sounded sweet, caring, but the more she said it, the heavier it began to feel. "You're not getting any younger. Mom, that garden's too much work for you now. You really think you can manage this house forever?" Her tone wasn't cruel, not exactly, just firm, like she'd already made up her mind about what my life should look like. I brushed it off as concern. She was my daughter. She loved me. Of course she did, but then came the talk about the bills. "You shouldn't handle money alone anymore, Mom," she said one afternoon, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "You forget things sometimes," I frowned. "I don't forget important things, sweetheart." "It's not that," she said quickly, smiling. "It's just, if something ever happened, it would be good if I could access the bank account, right? For emergencies." She was so calm, so rational about it. And I was tired that day, tired of missing Henry, tired of paperwork, tired of feeling fragile. So I nodded. "All right, if it'll make things easier." And just like that, I added her name to my account. She hugged me tight afterward. "You'll see, Mom, this will make life so much simpler." At the time, I thought it was a small gesture of trust. I didn't realize I'd just handed her the keys to everything I owned. The little changes started after that. She'd stop by unannounced. Sometimes with groceries, sometimes with ideas. "You know, Mom, this house is so old-fashioned," she'd say, running her fingers along the wallpaper. "Imagine what it could look like with a renovation." I'd laugh softly. "I like it the way it is, darling." "Sure, but it's your style," she'd reply. "Not exactly modern, is it?" She started moving my things, small things at first. The vase Henry bought from Italy. "The old lamp by the window. Just decluttering," she'd say, smiling. "Less for you to trip over." And I'd smile back, pretending not to notice the faint irritation behind her voice when I told her to put something back. One afternoon, I found her in Henry's study. She was standing by his desk, running her hand over the photo of him in his old Navy uniform. "You should really let this room go, Mom," she said without looking at me. "It's not healthy holding on to the past." My chest tightened. "This isn't just a room. It's your father's." "Exactly," she said, turning to face me. "He's gone. You need to start living again." "I am living," she sighed, tilting her head like she pitied me. "No, Mom, you're existing." "That's different," her words stung, but I stayed quiet. After she left that day, I sat in Henry's chair for hours, staring at the window. Dust floated in the golden light like tiny ghosts. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was stuck, but it was my way of keeping love alive. For months, I convinced myself everything she said came from love. That she just wanted me safe. That she was being practical, not unkind. But sometimes, when I'd catch her watching me, there was something in her eyes I couldn't quite name. Impatience, maybe. Or calculation. She'd smile when I looked up, but the smile didn't always reach her eyes anymore. There was one evening that should have told me everything. We were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky pink and gold. I had a cup of tea in my hands. "You know, Mom," she said casually, "you shouldn't live alone anymore." I laughed softly. "Oh, please, I've been taking care of myself for nearly 60 years. "That's not what I mean," she said, her voice calm but steady. "This house, it's too big for one person. And it's old. You deserve something smaller, cozier, safer." I looked at her. "You mean sell it?" She shrugged. "Eventually. It's just a lot for you to handle." There was a long pause. The sun dipped lower. The air cooled. "Lydia," I said quietly, Your father built this porch with his hands. I know, Mom, she said quickly, smiling again. I'm not saying now, just think about it, okay? Then she reached over and squeezed my hand. Her grip was warm, steady, too steady, and for the first time, something in me felt uneasy, like she wasn't asking. She was waiting. That night, after she drove home, I walked through every room in the house. I ran my hand over the walls, the furniture, the memories. Everything here was a piece of me. I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. But for the first time, the thought crossed my mind, what if she really wanted me gone? I pushed it away immediately. What kind of mother thinks that about her child? I shook my head, laughed it off, and told myself I was being dramatic. She loved me. She had to love me, didn't she? But now, lying in bed days later, after hearing her say those awful words, I realized the signs were always there, hidden beneath the smiles. Disguised as care, wrapped in concern, every gesture, every sweet suggestion, every talk about safety and aging. They weren't warnings. They were steps, and I was walking straight into her trap, smiling all the way. It's strange how fast love can turn into doubt. One day you're sharing tea with your daughter, laughing about old memories, and the next, every smile feels rehearsed. After that conversation about selling the house, something in the air changed. I couldn't explain it, just a faint tension, like static before a storm. At first, it was small things, little slips, little shadows. A few weeks later, I noticed a letter missing from the stack of mail I always kept by the kitchen counter. It was from the bank, one of those thick envelopes they send every month. Oh, I already took care of that, Lydia said casually when I asked. Took care of it? I frowned. What do you mean? You don't need to worry about it, Mom. I just transferred a payment online. The statement was junk anyway. Her tone was cheerful, practiced. She waved it off like it was nothing. I told myself not to overthink. Maybe she was just helping. Maybe she was making life easier. But the next week, another letter disappeared. Then another. Soon, the mailbox started to feel like a mystery box. I never knew what I was going to find, or what had quietly vanished. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and saw Lydia hunched over my bills, papers spread across the table. Oh. You startled me, she said, quickly covering a document with her hand. What's that? I asked, stepping closer. Just some receipts. Don't worry about it. Her voice was light, but her hand stayed firmly over the paper. Can I see? Mom, she said, laughing awkwardly. I told you it's fine. I'm just organizing things. Something cold twisted in my stomach. Lydia, I'd like to see it. She froze for a split second, just long enough for me to notice. Then she smiled again. You're so cute when you get suspicious. It's just boring paperwork. Look, she lifted her hand. And there it was, a form with my name printed neatly at the top, and some kind of authorization letter underneath. Before I could read it fully, she folded it in half and slipped it into a folder. See? Boring. I stood there for a moment watching her. Her face didn't look like the face of my little girl anymore. It was calm, controlled, almost professional. A few days later, she came over with a man. Mom, this is Alan, she said with a bright smile. He's a financial advisor. He's going to help us manage everything. Us? I repeated. Alan was polite. I'll give him that. He was dressed too neatly, gray suit, shiny shoes, the kind of man who smelled faintly of expensive cologne and confidence. He shook my hand, but his eyes didn't quite meet mine. Mrs. Walker? It's a pleasure, he said softly. I nodded slowly. You work with Lydia? Yes, I help families plan their financial futures. Something about that phrasing made me uneasy. Families, not you. Lydia laughed and put a hand on his arm. He's great, Mom. You'll love him. He's already saving us so much stress. Us. Again, that word. Alan visited a few times after that. Always with a folder. Always polite. He'd talk mostly to Lydia, barely glancing in my direction. Once I tried to join the conversation. So, Alan, I said, sitting across from him, what exactly are you helping my daughter with? He smiled politely. Oh, just simplifying the finances. Helping set up some accounts for future stability, I frowned. Future stability for who? For both of you, of course. he said smoothly, but his eyes darted toward Lydia like he was waiting for approval. Mom, Lydia said quickly, please, let the relax. It was the same tone she used when I worried about her as a teenager sneaking home past curfew. The tone that said, you don't understand. So I tried to relax, tried to trust her, but something in my gut kept screaming that I shouldn't. The changes came quietly. One morning, I went to pay the electric bill online. My account access was temporarily suspended. I called Lydia. Sweetheart, do you know what's going on with the electric bill? I can't log in. Oh, I changed the password, she said easily. It's just easier if I keep track of everything. You don't need to stress about it, I paused. Without telling me? Mom, please. You've been saying you're tired lately. Let me help, okay? Her words were sweet, but her tone left no room for argument. I hung up slowly, staring at the screen. My own house, my own bills, and I wasn't even allowed in anymore. A week later, I was watering the roses when I heard voices from the living room window. Lydia and Alan again. She'll thank me later, Lydia said, her tone low but firm. When she's not burdened with all this decision-making. Alan's voice followed, softer. Are you sure she's ready for this transfer? She doesn't need to know every detail, Lydia replied. She's too sentimental. I'm doing what's best for her. My hands froze around the watering can. Water spilled onto my shoes, soaking through my socks. Transfer? I felt my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't dare move. Alan said something else, but I couldn't catch it. All I heard was Lydia's calm, confident tone. Trust me. I've got everything under control. Under control. The words felt like a punch to my chest. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the dark window. My reflection looked older than I remembered. Tired, frightened, small. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe she really was trying to help. But then I thought of all the things that had quietly changed. The missing mail. The new advisor. The passwords. And the way she looked at me now. Not with love, but with impatience. Like I was a project to finish. A few days later, I caught Alan leaving the house. He was holding a stack of folders, thick, heavy, and familiar. Alan? I called out. He turned, startled. Oh, Mrs. Walker! You're home early. I narrowed my eyes. What are those? He hesitated. Just some files Lydia asked me to review. From where? Your study. My study? My voice cracked slightly. Those are personal files. My husband's are records. He adjusted his tie nervously. Yes, well, Lydia said you wanted everything organized. She gave me permission. Before I could respond, Lydia appeared in the doorway behind him. Mom, she said sharply, what's going on? I turned to her, trembling. Why is he taking things from the study? That room is private. Her jaw tightened. Oh, for God's sake, Mom, they're papers. Stop being so dramatic. Those papers are your father's work. And they're covered in dust. She snapped, stepping closer. You said yourself it's time to move on. You did say that, remember? No, I didn't mean... You're imagining things, she cut me off, her voice cold now. Alan is just helping me get everything in order. You should be thanking him, not interrogating him. Alan looked like he wanted to vanish into thin air. I just stood there, shaking. Finally, he cleared his throat. I'll come back another time. He brushed past me and hurried out the door. Lydia glared after him, then turned to me. See what you did? You embarrassed him. You're not yourself lately, Mom. Maybe you need more rest. Her voice softened at the end. Almost tender, but her eyes stayed hard. Then she walked past me. Her perfume trailing behind her like smoke. That night, I went into Henry's study. The shelves were emptier now. Dust rings marked where folders used to sit. I lowered myself into his chair. The leather creaked under my weight. Familiar and comforting. The air smelled faintly of old paper and sadness. I closed my eyes, my fingers gripping the armrests, and for the first time, I whispered the words I'd been too afraid to say out loud. Something's wrong with my own child. The room stayed silent. Even the clock seemed to stop ticking, and in that silence, I felt the truth settle over me like a shadow. This wasn't love anymore. It was something else, something cold, something I couldn't yet name. The rain had been falling all afternoon, soft and steady, the kind of rain that usually makes me want to light a candle and read by the window. But that day, the sound felt like a warning, like the sky itself was trying to tell me something I didn't want to hear. I had spent the morning tidying the kitchen, replaying my daughter's last words to me. "Mom, don't worry about the bills. I'll handle everything." Her voice had that sugary tone again. Too calm, too controlled. I told myself to stop being suspicious, to stop overthinking. "She's your daughter," I whispered. "Your only daughter." But my chest wouldn't stop tightening. I went upstairs to put away some laundry when I heard her voice drift up from the living room. At first, I thought she was on another business call. She'd been having so many lately, always stepping outside, always lowering her voice. But this time, she wasn't outside, and the voice wasn't lowered. She was on speakerphone. "I'm telling you, it's taking forever," she said, with an impatient sigh. The sound of her fork clinking against a plate echoed faintly through the vent near the stairs. I mean, how long can someone live just sitting around that house? A man laughed on the other end, a sharp, familiar laugh. The same voice I'd heard in my kitchen weeks ago. The so-called advisor, he said, "You can't rush these things. Once she signs the rest of the paperwork, the house is practically yours." My hands froze around the folded laundry. Then my daughter's voice again, sharper this time, half whining. "Yeah, but she keeps asking questions." I told her it's just some tax forms. I swear, if she finds out what we're doing... I didn't even realize I'd started moving. I crept closer to the top of the stairs, heart hammering so loud I was afraid she'd hear it. The vent carried every word. She laughed suddenly, bitter and cold. "I just wish she'd hurry up and..." A pause. Then, clearer than anything, she finished, "Just die already so I can finally sell that house." The words hit me like a blade. I felt the air leave my lungs. For a second I thought maybe I misheard. Maybe she said, "Get by already," or "Retire already." Anything else. But no. The laughter that followed was unmistakable. Her laughter. My daughter's laughter. The man chuckled again. "You're horrible," he teased. And she said, "Oh, please." "I'm kidding. Sort of. Sort of." Those two words shattered something in me that I didn't even know could break. My knees trembled. The laundry basket slipped from my hands, hitting the floor with a dull thud. I stumbled back, grabbing the banister to keep myself upright. The house suddenly felt foreign, cold, unrecognizable. My daughter's voice. It didn't belong to the little girl I raised. It belonged to a stranger. I backed away from the stairs, one slow step at a time, my breath coming out in shaky gasps. Every sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the rain outside, the ticking of the clock, felt amplified, mocking. When I reached my bedroom, I closed the door and locked it, as if that could keep the truth out. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the framed photo on my nightstand, the one from her high school graduation. Her arm around my shoulder, smiling so wide, her eyes bright with pride, I whispered, "When did you stop loving me?" Tears burned down my cheeks before I could stop them. I pressed my hand against my mouth to stifle a sob. My chest hurt so much I thought it might split open. Then came the guilt. The confusion. The desperate, stupid hope. "Maybe she's just stressed," I whispered. Maybe she didn't mean it, but deep down I knew better. The tone in her voice, the cold amusement, that wasn't stress. That was resentment, greed, and all the little moments came rushing back like an avalanche. The missing mail, the secret calls, the new bank documents she'd made me sign without letting me read. The day she introduced that advisor and said, "Mom, trust me, I've got everything under control." Under control, yes. She had me under control. I stood up, trembling, and walked to the corner of the room where my husband's old study desk stood, untouched since he died. The drawer creaked when I opened it. Inside was the small black key to our home safe. I hesitated for a long moment, staring at it in my palm. It felt heavier than it used to. Finally, I walked to the closet, pushed aside a few coats, and knelt down in front of the safe. My hands shook as I turned the lock and swung the door open. There it was, my will, folded neatly inside a brown envelope, along with my late husband's life insurance papers. We'd prepared them together years ago. I remembered how proud I felt that day. that we were protecting our family's future. Now, that same paper felt like a death sentence. I unfolded the first page and read the words I'd written myself. In the event of my passing, all property and savings shall go to my daughter. I sank to the floor, clutching it to my chest. Tears blurred the ink. I could almost hear my husband's voice in my head, the one argument we'd ever had about the will. He'd said, maybe we should split the assets differently. She's young, Martha. She might not understand the weight of this responsibility. And I had snapped, she's our daughter. She'd never misuse it. Now, sitting there on the cold floor, I whispered to his photo on the wall. You were right. She's not the same girl anymore. For a long time, I stayed like that, curled up beside the open safe, the will spread across my lap, the rain still whispering against the window. My heart felt hollow, like someone had scooped the life out of me and left only the echo. Downstairs, I heard footsteps. Her voice again, light, cheerful. Mom, are you okay? Do you want some tea? I wiped my tears and stared at the door. My throat tightened, but I forced my voice to sound steady. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just resting. There was a pause. Then she said, all right, don't stay up too late, okay? I listened to her steps fading down the hall, and my blood ran cold. The same lips that said, die already, were now calling me sweetheart. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her laughing with that man, her voice dripping with casual cruelty. And I wondered, how much longer before she decided to make it happen? I turned toward my husband's photo again, my voice barely a whisper. What should I do? She's my daughter. The room felt heavier, darker. The rain had stopped, but the silence it left behind was worse. Because now, I knew the truth, and once you know the truth, you can never go back. I woke up the next morning with a pounding headache and a heart that felt like it had aged 20 years overnight. The night before kept replaying in my mind, her voice, her laughter, that one cruel sentence that refused to fade. Just die already. I could still hear it, echoing in my head like a curse. The house felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by memories. Every photo on the wall mocked me. Birthdays, graduations, holidays. Smiles that used to mean something. I made myself a cup of tea, but my hands trembled so much I spilled it across the counter. The smell of chamomile hit the air, sharp and bitter, and that's when I decided I needed to know everything. Not just what she said, but what she'd done. I went to my desk and pulled out the small stack of envelopes she usually handled. Bills, bank letters, insurance forms. She always said, Mom, don't stress. I'll take care of it. But as I spread them across the table, a chill ran down my spine. Several were already opened. Some were missing pages. And one envelope, from the bank, had a faint coffee stain that wasn't mine. I unfolded it slowly, my eyes scanning the words until they blurred together. Then I saw it. Withdrawal confirmation, $4,200, the date. Was last week. I stared at it for a long time, trying to breathe, trying to make it make sense. Then another letter. Another withdrawal, $3,600, and another, each one neatly filed, signed with both our names. Both. My chest tightened. My hands went cold. She'd been taking money, my money, for months, not a loan. Not an accident. She'd signed my name, forged my signature. The same little girl whose tiny hand I used to guide when teaching her how to write the letter M. I sat there for what felt like hours. The clock ticked, the tea went cold, and my whole world shrank down to those papers. I whispered. I raised her to be honest. How did greed take my child away from me? Then I heard her voice in my head again, laughing with that man. She'll thank me later when she's not burdened with decisions. Burdened. That's what I was to her. A burden. I couldn't breathe. I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling the tremor in my heartbeat. I knew what I had to do, even though the thought of it broke me. That afternoon, I took a bus into town. I didn't tell her I was leaving. I didn't leave a note. Every bump in the road made me second-guess myself. But I held my purse tight against my lap and repeated the same words over and over in my head. You have to protect yourself now. When I stepped into the law office, the smell of old paper and leather filled the air, a smell I remembered from years ago. When my husband and I had come here together, "Mrs. Langford?" A familiar voice called. Mr. Gray, my late husband's attorney, looked older now, softer around the edges, but his eyes were still sharp, kind. "Goodness," he said, standing to shake my hand. "It's been a long time. How are you holding up?" I tried to answer, but my voice cracked. "Not well, Mr. Gray. I need your help." He motioned me to sit, concern lining his face. "Tell me everything," I told him. "All of it. The missing mail, the advisor, the phone call, the forged withdrawals." By the time I finished, my voice was shaking so badly I could barely speak. He sat back in silence for a moment, then took off his glasses. "Martha," he said gently, "I've seen things like this before." "I'm so sorry," I shook my head. "No, not her. Not my daughter." "I believe you," he said softly, "but you need to act quickly. Do you still have your joint account with her?" "Yes." "Then you need to revoke her access immediately. The bank can freeze transactions under your name alone. I'll help you file it." He leaned forward, voice calm but firm. "You also need to update your will. You can't risk leaving your assets in the wrong hands." My throat went dry. "You mean cut her out completely?" He didn't answer right away. He just met my eyes, the silence saying everything. Finally, I whispered, "Do it." He printed new documents, pages and pages of them, and explained every line carefully. My hands were trembling so much I could barely hold the pen. But when I reached the last page, I stopped. My signature space stared back at me, empty and waiting. That tiny line felt like the edge of a cliff, one I could never return from once I crossed it. I could hear her as a child laughing, "Mommy, look!" I wrote my name, and now I was signing her out of my life. I pressed the pen to the paper, my voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't revenge. It's survival." Then I signed, my full name, slowly, carefully, for me. Mr. Gray gathered the papers and gave me a reassuring smile. "You did the right thing. You're protecting yourself, Martha. That's what your husband would have wanted." Tears welled in my eyes, but for the first time in weeks, they weren't from pain. They were from relief. I nodded, managing a shaky smile. "Thank you, Mr. Gray. I feel lighter somehow." He stood, walking me to the door. "If she contacts you about finances, don't engage. Let me handle it. I will." As I stepped outside, the afternoon sun hit my face, bright and blinding. For a second, it felt like hope. But then, something made me freeze. Across the street, parked just behind a line of cars, was a silver sedan. Her silver sedan, the same dent on the side door. I saw her. Sitting there, hands gripping the wheel, watching me. My heart dropped into my stomach. For a moment, neither of us moved. The noise of the street faded. No cars, no voices, just that silent, suffocating stare between us. Then she smiled, a slow, thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. I took a step back toward the office door, but before I could move again, her engine roared to life. The car pulled out of the line and disappeared around the corner. I stood there frozen, papers clutched to my chest, the wind tugging at my coat. I whispered, "She knows." I turned back toward the law office, my knees weak, my voice barely steady. "She knows," I repeated, the words trembling on my lips, because in that moment, I realized this wasn't over. She wasn't just watching me. She was planning her next move. After that day outside the attorney's office, everything changed. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, every sound in the house making me flinch. The wind against the window, the creak in the hallway. Even the faint ticking of the clock sounded like footsteps. I knew she was watching me now. And if she was watching, it meant she suspected something. I had to move carefully, very carefully. The next morning I started small. I took the old jewelry box from my dresser, the one she always said was tacky and old-fashioned, and carried it to the laundry room. Hidden behind the detergent bottles, I pried open the loose tile near the floor and slid the box inside. My hands trembled as I pushed it into the dark gap. All the heirlooms, every small piece of gold, the necklace my husband gave me on our 10th anniversary, all gone from sight. I won't make it easy for you, I whispered under my breath. Then I changed the locks on my mailbox. Bought a new key, told the postman. Please don't let anyone else collect my letters. He smiled politely. Unaware that my voice was shaking for reasons I couldn't explain, that evening, she came over. Her footsteps sounded different now, heavier, slower. The warmth that used to fill the room when she walked in was gone. Hey, Mom, she said casually, placing her bag on the counter. What have you been up to today? Just organizing, I said, keeping my voice light. Organizing? She repeated, her eyes narrowing slightly. You never organize. You hate paperwork. I'm learning. She smiled, but it wasn't real. Good for you, that smile. I'll never forget it. It was the kind people wear when they're trying to read your mind. At dinner, the silence between us was thick. I watched her push her food around the plate while I pretended to focus on mine. The clink of silverware was the only sound for a long time until she finally spoke. Mom, she said softly, you've been different lately. Different? Forgetful, she continued, voice sugar-sweet. Like when you thought I'd taken money from the account. Remember that? I froze. You did, she cut me off with a laugh. You must be confused. I told you I was transferring funds to fix your roof. You even thanked me for it. My fork hit the plate with a sharp clang. No, I didn't, her expression hardened. See, you're mixing things up again. You've been under stress. Maybe we should talk to someone. A doctor, maybe? My throat went dry. A doctor? From memory, she said quickly. You've been forgetting small things, that's all. Nothing to be ashamed of. I stared at her, and for a split second, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Satisfaction. Like she was already building a story where I was the unstable one. That night, after she left, I sat at the kitchen table and opened an old spiral notebook. The first page was blank, so I wrote in shaky letters, record of everything. Then I began listing dates. Every insult, every lie, every misunderstanding. October 2nd, accused me of being forgetful. October 3rd, opened mail before I saw it. October 4th, mentioned doctor again. Each word was a piece of armor, because if she was building a story, I would have proof. As I wrote, I whispered to myself, they think old age means weakness. But I remember everything. Days passed. She grew more cautious, and so did I. We moved around each other like strangers wearing masks. She'd show up with groceries, smile too wide, then scan the counters like she was checking for something missing. Sometimes I'd catch her glancing at my phone, at my keys. Once, she stood outside the study pretending to dust the shelves. But I saw her reflection in the glass, eyes fixed on my purse. When I walked in, she jumped and said too quickly, "Just cleaning, Mom." I smiled. Of course, we both knew it was a lie. One evening, I left my recorder, an old handheld one I used to use for recipes, on the coffee table, running quietly under a magazine. She came over with dinner, pretending everything was fine. Halfway through the meal, she sighed dramatically and said, "You know, Mom, I've been talking to someone. They think it might be time we consider assisted living for you." My fork froze in midair. "Excuse me?" "It's just," she sighed again, eyes full of fake concern. "You've been so stressed lately. You keep locking things, hiding things. You're paranoid, paranoid." She reached across the table, her hand barely touching mine. "I'm just worried about you." "I love you, Mom." Her tone was honey, but her grip was steel. I smiled thinly. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm not going anywhere." The way her face tightened, she hated that. That night, I added another entry to my notebook. October 10th, mentioned assisted living. Possible manipulation tactic. Every word was a seed of truth I'd bury deep, because one day I knew I'd need to show the world who was lying. But tension has a way of finding its breaking point. And ours came sooner than I expected. We were in the living room. The news was on, but neither of us was watching. I asked her, "Did you check the mail today?" She didn't answer, so I asked again, louder, "Did you check the mail?" She slammed her glass down. "Why are you so obsessed with mail, Mom?" "You're losing it!" Her words hit like a slap. "I just asked a question. You don't even make sense anymore." She screamed, standing up. "You've been acting crazy, talking to yourself, hiding things. Stop it!" I shouted. My voice cracked. "Stop twisting everything." She stared at me, chest heaving. Then her expression changed, soft, pitying, manipulative. You see? This is what I mean. You need help. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the window rattled. The silence she left behind was deafening. I sat down slowly, my heart pounding. The recorder on the table was still blinking red. I reached for it, pressing it to my chest. "Let her try," I whispered. "I have proof," but I didn't expect what came next. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, expecting her, maybe ready to apologize, maybe ready to start another argument. Instead, a stranger stood there, a woman in a gray coat holding a clipboard. She smiled gently. "Good morning, Mrs. Langford. I'm from Adult Services. We received a concerned report about your mental health." My blood ran cold. I gripped the edge of the door, my voice barely a whisper. "A report? From who?" The woman glanced down at her form and said softly, "It says, your daughter." The world tilted around me, because now she wasn't just trying to take my house. She was trying to take me. The moment that social worker stepped into my house, I knew she didn't come here to help me. She came to assess me, to see if I was safe, to see if I was sane. I stood frozen in my living room, her clipboard clutched in her hands. She smiled, the kind of professional smile people wear when they've already made up their mind. "Your daughter's just concerned, Mrs. Langford," she said softly. "She mentioned you've been anxious, forgetful." I forced myself to breathe. "I'm neither anxious nor forgetful. I know exactly what's happening here." Her eyes flicked toward my shaking hands. "You seem nervous. Wouldn't you be," I said bitterly, "if your own child were trying to paint you as insane?" She hesitated, clearly unsure what to say. "Maybe we should sit down." I sat, not because I trusted her, but because I wanted to show her I wasn't some fragile old woman. She asked about my medication, my finances, even my sleeping habits. Every question felt like a trap. When she finally left, she said, "We'll follow up soon." The moment the door closed, I sank to the floor. My heart wouldn't stop pounding. I whispered to myself, "She's turning everyone against me." And that was only the beginning. Within days, I started noticing strange things. Neighbors stopped waving. At the grocery store, 2 women from church whispered, then turned away when they saw me. I caught fragments of their words. "Poor thing. She's not all there anymore." Such a shame. It felt like my world was shrinking. Every corner filled with suspicion and pity. Even the doctor, my doctor, started acting differently. When I went in for a regular checkup, he frowned at his screen. "Martha," he said carefully, "your daughter reached out to us. She's worried about your memory. She mentioned you've been misplacing things, forgetting names." "That's not true," I cut in. "She's lying. She's setting me up," he sighed. "She seems genuinely concerned. Maybe it would help to do a quick cognitive evaluation." "Just routine," I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Routine or evidence?" He didn't answer. Just clicked his pen and said, "It'll only take a few minutes." I left before he could finish. When I got home, I tore the appointment slip into pieces. I was being surrounded, cornered by my own blood. A week later, an envelope arrived. Thick, official, stamped with a law firm's seal. My hands shook as I opened it. Petition for conservatorship filed by my daughter. She was asking the court to declare me mentally incompetent and hand her control of my estate, my finances, my life. I couldn't breathe. The walls seemed to close in. "She's trying to erase me," I whispered. The betrayal was complete now. Not just emotional or financial, it was legal. She was going to take everything I had left. That night, I broke down completely. I sat on the floor of the living room, the same spot where my husband used to sit and read, and cried until my voice gave out. I looked up at his picture on the mantel. "What do I do, James? She's our daughter. How did she become this?" The silence of the house felt heavier than ever. And then I remembered his brother, Thomas, a retired detective. He'd always had that calm, steady presence, the kind of man who could read a lie before it even left your lips. I picked up the phone and dialed his number with trembling fingers. "Thomas? Martha?" His voice was warm, familiar. "You sound shaken." "What's going on?" So I told him everything. The withdrawals, the gaslighting, the social worker, the conservatorship papers. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then he said quietly, "Pack whatever you can't afford to lose." "I'm coming over." He arrived 2 hours later, tall, gray-haired, still wearing that old leather jacket he refused to We started immediately. Thomas brought a small camera and voice recorder. He taught me how to use them. "Keep one in your pocket," he said. "Record every conversation with her. Don't let her know." He also helped me organize my notebook, the one I'd been keeping, into categories: financial manipulation, emotional abuse, witnesses. When we finished, he smiled faintly. "You've got the makings of a detective, Martha," I managed a weak laugh. Guess I had to learn fast. But as we worked, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. Once I caught her car parked near the corner, engine off, headlights dim. Another night, the phone rang and no one answered. Just silence. Thomas noticed it too. "She's nervous," he said. "She knows you're slipping out of her control." And she was right to be nervous, because I was done being afraid. The next morning, I decided to confront her. I called and said, "I got your papers." She didn't sound surprised. "I figured you would. How could you?" My voice cracked. "You're my daughter," her reply was cold. "I'm protecting you, Mom. You're not thinking clearly anymore. You've been talking to people, making accusations, hiding money. That's because you stole it." Her tone sharpened. "See, this is what I mean. You're paranoid." I swallowed hard. "You're destroying me." She let out a tired sigh. "You're doing that yourself." And then, click, the line went dead. Thomas played back the call from the recorder. "Good," he said. "We've got her voice, her tone. The manipulation." He looked at me. "Now we wait. She'll make another move soon." He was right, because the very next day, another envelope arrived. This one wasn't just a letter. It was a summons. I held it in my shaking hands, the bold black letters burning into my eyes. "You are hereby ordered to appear before the county court." Regarding your competency hearing, my knees nearly gave out. "She's really doing it," I whispered. "She's taking me to court." Thomas placed a hand on my shoulder. "Then that's where we fight her. With facts, not fear." But inside, fear was all I felt. The walls of my home, the same home I'd built with my husband, painted with love and laughter, now felt like a prison. Every shadow looked like betrayal. Every silence felt like a countdown. I stood at the window, staring out into the dark, and saw headlights flash down the street. Her car again. Parked under the old oak tree, watching, waiting. I whispered to myself, "You want a war, sweetheart? Then you've got one." And in that moment, something hardened inside me. The mother who once defended her, forgave her, made excuses for her. She was gone. All that was left was a woman fighting to survive. The next morning, Thomas spread the papers across the table. "We have everything we need," he said. But before I could respond, there was another knock at the door. I opened it, and a man in a suit handed me another document. "Mrs. Langford," he said, "you've been served. The hearing is in 10 days. 10 days to prove I wasn't crazy. 10 days to stop my own daughter from taking my life away." The morning they came for me, the sky was the same pale gray as always. But everything inside the house felt suddenly loud. The clock, my breath, the neighbor's footsteps on the sidewalk. I was in the kitchen, making myself tea, when there was a knock that sounded different, hard, official, like the knock before bad news. I opened the door and saw Lydia standing on the porch, but she wasn't alone. 2 uniformed officers flanked her, and the social worker from before stood to the side, clipboard in hand, eyes steady. "Mrs. Langford," one of the officers said, polite but firm, "we received a report expressing concern for your safety." I felt the floor tilt. "Concern from who?" I asked, my voice small. Lydia stepped forward, very calm. "From me," she said sweetly, as if offering tea. "I found some notes, Mom, about you making odd statements, leaving the stove on, acting confused." The social worker smiled that professional smile. "We just want to make sure you're okay." My hands were still wrapped around the kettle. The water steamed between my fingers. "There's nothing wrong with me," I said. "I'm fine." She looked at me like I was a script she'd read before. "Mrs. Langford, we need to ask you a few questions." They sat me at the kitchen table as if I were a stranger. The officers asked about my daily routine. The social worker asked about my memory. Lydia answered some questions for me before I could, finishing my sentences with a kind of practiced impatience. "She's been leaving the gas on," Lydia told them calmly. "She forgets to turn things off. She wanders at night. I open my mouth." "That's not true, Mom?" the social worker asked softly. "Have you been seeing a doctor about memory issues?" "No," I said, and the word felt small and desperate. "I don't need—" "It's okay," Lydia said, sliding closer. "We just want what's best for you." Her hand hovered near mine, but she didn't touch me. It was theater, I knew it. The neighbors had already started to gather at the windows. I could feel their eyes on me like pins. They asked to look around the house for safety. An officer walked through the rooms with a flashlight and a form. He asked me to open drawers, cupboards. He checked the stove, the heater. The social worker made notes and smiled at Lydia like she'd passed some test. When the officer came to Henry's study, he opened the safe. He pulled out a few papers, rifled through them, and then looked up with a face I barely recognized. "Some of these documents are concerning," he said. Lydia was suddenly beside him, hurried and bright. "Mom keeps important papers everywhere," she explained. "You see? She doesn't know what she's doing anymore." I felt something cold slide down my spine. "Those are private," I managed to whisper. "Please don't. We have to ensure you're safe, Mrs. Langford," the officer said. "For your own good." Neighbors were peeking over their hedges now. Mrs. Calloway from next door stood at her gate with a hand to her mouth. Mr. Jenkins from down the street crossed his arms and looked away. Whispers swelled and wrapped around the house like fog. At one point, a neighbor I'd known for 20 years approached and asked quietly, "Are you all right, Martha?" I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to say, "She's lying. She's taking everything." But Lydia had already been there, planting seeds. I felt my throat close. "Mrs. Langford," the social worker said gently, "we're going to recommend a temporary hold while we complete a full assessment." My heart dropped into my stomach. "A hold?" I echoed. "You can't—" Lydia's eyes were hard as flint. "It's for your safety, Mom." They left a list of instructions on the counter. Contact numbers, appointment dates, advisories. "We'll be back," the officer said. "If there's any change, call us." After they left, the house felt smaller. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. I walked through each room like someone afraid a trap might snap closed at any moment. Henry's study looked violated. Papers moved, folders ruffled. My safe had been opened. The places where I'd hidden things were exposed. I sat down on the couch and cried. It wasn't loud at first, just wet, trembling sobs. But then the level of humiliation swept over me like a wave. I heard Lydia in the next room, speaking to some call on the phone in that same bright, practiced voice. Yes, they came. "Everything's going as planned." The words were simple, but they tore me open. That afternoon, I called Thomas. His voice on the line steadied me. "Don't do anything rash," he said quietly. "Document everything. Keep the recordings. I'll come down tonight." When he arrived, he moved through the house with the same steady calm he always had. He sat at the kitchen table and flipped through my notebook, my list of dates, my recordings. He didn't flinch at the mess the officers left behind. He just nodded. "She's aggressive," he said finally, eyes steady. "She's filed paperwork, forged notes. It looks like your doctor was pressured to make comments. We're dealing with a coordinated campaign." "I feel like I'm being buried alive while still breathing," I whispered, voice breaking. The words spilled out raw and true. Thomas put his hand over mine. "We'll fight this," he promised. "I'll talk to the attorney. We'll gather witnesses. We'll show the court who she really is." I wanted to believe him, but the humiliation had stripped me bare. Neighbors who once brought casseroles now kept their distance. The certainty that my home, my sanctuary, could be turned against me by my own child was a breathless, endless ache. That night, after Thomas left, I went to Henry's picture on the mantel. His grin looked softer than ever in the lamplight. I pressed my palm to the glass as if the warmth might cross. "You want war?" I whispered, tears brimming. If she wants war, I'll give her one. Her hesitation lasted barely a second. You have it. What's going on? I'm gathering proof, I said. Real proof of everything Lydia's done. There was a pause. Then her tone changed, softer, stronger. Whatever you need, I'm with you. That night, Nancy slipped over after dark, a scarf around her head, like some kind of suburban spy. We sat by the window with the lights off, whispering like conspirators. I told her everything, the forged notes, the frozen accounts, the lies. She listened, face tight with disbelief and fury. That girl, she muttered. She's dangerous. I know, I said. That's why we're going to outsmart her. The next few weeks were a storm of quiet planning. Thomas handled the legal side, tracking down notaries, requesting bank footage, cross-referencing dates. Nancy helped me record everything. She taught me how to use the voice recorder app on my old phone, how to hide it during calls, how to back it up in the cloud. Every night, we'd meet in my kitchen, hushed but electric, our teacups trembling in our hands. She called again, I told them one evening. She wanted me to sign something about transferring the house. Thomas raised an eyebrow. Did you record it? I nodded. Every word. He smiled, just a little. Good, that's evidence. I started acting the part Lydia expected, quiet, dazed, harmless. It gave me space to move. When she came over pretending to check in, I'd let her talk. Her voice would drip with condescension. You've always been so trusting, Mom, she'd say. But don't worry, I'll handle the details. And I'd nod, recording every syllable. The first time I caught her slip up, admitting she'd adjusted some paperwork, I felt a thrill so sharp it scared me. I transferred the file to a hidden USB and tucked it behind the sugar jar. Thomas connected me with a private investigator, a quiet woman named Rachel who'd once worked in family law. She came by in a gray coat and took photos of every document Lydia had filed. Your daughter's sloppy, Rachel murmured. She's left trails all over the place, fake receipts, duplicate forms. Her tone was almost admiring. You'd be surprised how often the greedy ones overplay their hand. By the end of the month, we had recordings, bank slips, witness statements from the notary who'd been pressured to sign under duress. Even emails Lydia had sent to the social worker, full of exaggerated stories about my dementia. I stared at those emails for a long time. My own child had written, "She forgets my name sometimes. I think she's dangerous to herself." My fingers trembled as I scrolled. They took my kindness as weakness, I whispered. Now they'll see what strength looks like. As the court date approached, Thomas and I met every evening to rehearse my testimony. He played the role of Lydia's lawyer. Cold and aggressive. "Mrs. Langford," he said one night, "isn't it true that you've been forgetful?" I met his eyes. "No, it's not. I remember every detail of what my daughter took from me." He smiled slightly. "Good, don't let her rattle you. The more she tries to act innocent, the clearer her lies will sound." We practiced again and again. Sometimes I broke down mid-sentence, the words catching in my throat. Sometimes I shouted, but each time I stood a little taller after. At night, when the house was quiet, I'd sit in front of the mirror and whisper the lines again, not like a performance, but like an oath. Nancy helped too. She sat in the audience chairs of my small living room while I practiced speaking aloud. "Too soft," she'd say. "Say it like you mean it, Martha. Say it like you're fighting for every year you gave her." And I would, until my voice filled the room and shook the air. The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house slowly, touching every wall, every memory. Henry's coat still hung in the closet. His watch still sat by the bedside. I took it in my hand, feeling the cool weight of it, and whispered, "Be with me tomorrow." In the silence, I could almost hear him, the calm steadiness he always carried, the reassurance that truth, no matter how long it takes, finds its way through. Morning came cold and clear. I dressed in my best navy suit, the one I'd worn to Henry's funeral. My hands didn't shake this time. I stood in front of the mirror, looked at my own reflection, the lines, the tired eyes, the quiet fire still burning behind them, and I said softly, to myself and to him, "Today, the truth speaks for itself." Then I picked up my folder, locked the door, and walked out to face her. The courtroom was colder than I'd imagined, not in temperature, but in feeling. The air was heavy, like it knew what was about to happen. I could hear the faint hum of whispers from the benches behind me, the creak of wooden chairs, the sound of my own pulse beating inside my ears. Across the aisle, Lydia sat perfectly still beside her lawyer, dressed in soft blue like she'd come straight from a Sunday service. Her hair was tied neatly, her hands folded in her lap, her face painted with sorrow. She even managed to look fragile, like she was the one who had been betrayed. I had to remind myself to breathe. Thomas leaned toward me and whispered, "No matter what she says, don't react." "Just listen," I nodded. But when Lydia glanced at me and I saw that faint smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth, every ounce of calm inside me burned away. The judge entered, an older woman with sharp eyes and a voice that cut through the room. "Court is now in session," she said. "We are here to review the conservatorship petition filed by Ms. Lydia Langford against her mother, Mrs. Martha Langford." That sound, against her mother, felt like a knife. Lydia's lawyer stood first. His tone honey-sweet and venomous. "Your Honor," he began, "this is not a case of greed or control. It's about compassion. My client is deeply concerned for her mother's well-being. Mrs. Langford has displayed increasing signs of confusion, paranoia, forgetfulness, and instability. We have medical notes and witness statements to prove it." He glanced toward me with mock sympathy. This is a daughter's plea to protect her mother from herself. I wanted to laugh. Protect me? From herself? Thomas placed a steady hand over mine, a silent warning. Not yet. Then Lydia stood. Her voice quivered, soft and fragile, every word rehearsed. "I never wanted it to come to this," she said. "But she's been different. She forgets things, accuses me of stealing, locks herself away for hours. I just want her safe." Tears gathered in her eyes, the kind of tears you practice in front of a mirror. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Langford, do you wish to respond now or after your counsel presents evidence?" I swallowed hard. "After, Your Honor." My voice shook a little, but it held. Thomas stood then, buttoning his jacket like a man preparing for battle. "Your Honor, this case is not about confusion. It's about deception, deliberate, calculated deception, by a daughter who sought to take what wasn't hers." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Lydia stiffened slightly, but kept her expression calm. "We have documented evidence," Thomas continued, "of forged signatures, falsified medical notes, and illegal transfers from Mrs. Langford's accounts, all tied to the petitioner." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Forged documents? You're certain?" "Absolutely, and we'll demonstrate that right now." The first exhibit was a set of emails. Thomas held them up. These were sent by the petitioner to a Dr. Collins, the physician who allegedly declared Mrs. Langford mentally unfit. However, Dr. Collins has submitted a statement saying he never wrote or signed any such report. Lydia's lawyer objected instantly, but Thomas overrode it with another piece of evidence, a voice recording. He pressed play. Lydia's voice filled the room, crisp and undeniable. "Mom, you don't need to read everything before you sign. I'll handle it." Then my voice, quieter, uncertain. "But what is it for?" And Lydia again, colder this time. "Just sign it, Mom. It's for your own good." Every whisper in that courtroom died. The judge looked at her sharply. "Ms. Langford, is this your voice?" Lydia's lips parted. I don't remember," Thomas interrupted. "We can confirm through forensic analysis that it is." Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably, whispering urgently to her, but she stared straight ahead, her hands gripping her dress. Next came the bank slips. "Here," Thomas said, laying them on the table. 2 transfers totaling $85,000 from Mrs. Langford's retirement fund, both signed during the week she was hospitalized. We have medical records proving she was unconscious at that time." The judge frowned deeply. "So she could not have signed them herself?" "Correct, Your Honor." I glanced at Lydia then. Her face had gone pale, the performance cracking. Then came the final blow. The notary's testimony. A woman named Gloria stepped up to the stand, trembling but resolute. She came to my office, Gloria said, pointing at Lydia, with a document claiming it was for her mother's insurance. But when I asked if her mother would be present to sign, she said, "She doesn't have to know. I'll take care of it." I refused to notarize, but I saw her later at another office, trying again. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Lydia's lawyer looked panicked now. "Your Honor," he said, "these accusations are outrageous. My client is being attacked." The judge cut him off. "Sit down, counselor." Her tone had changed, colder, sharper. Thomas turned to me.
"Mrs. Langford, would you like to speak now?"
My knees felt weak as I stood. My heart thudded like thunder in my chest. I looked at Lydia, my daughter, and for a moment I saw her as she'd been when she was little. Her laughter in the garden, her tiny hand gripping mine. Then that image shattered under the weight of what she'd done. I faced the judge. The silence that followed was thick, electric. The judge took off her glasses, studied Lydia for a long moment, and then spoke. "Ms. Langford," she said evenly, "this court finds no evidence of mental incompetence on your mother's part. However, we do find substantial evidence suggesting fraud, forgery, and financial manipulation. Effective immediately, the petition for conservatorship is denied, and this court is opening a formal investigation into your conduct." Lydia's lawyer froze. Lydia herself looked as though all the air had been sucked from the room. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The gavel struck. "This session is adjourned." The sound echoed like a thunderclap, final and absolute. Lydia stood suddenly, knocking over her chair. She turned to me, her face ghost white, eyes burning with fury. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You think this is over? You have no idea what I can do." She stormed out, the door slamming behind her so hard the walls shook. I stood frozen for a moment, my whole body trembling. Then Thomas touched my arm gently. "You did it," he said quietly. "You stood your ground." But as I watched that door swing closed behind her, a chill crawled up my spine, because something in her eyes told me this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The house was finally quiet again. No officers, no lawyers, no whispers echoing through the halls, just me and the ticking clock in the kitchen. For the first time in months, I felt air fill my lungs without weight pressing against it. The court had cleared my name. The bank restored my accounts. My will was rewritten in my own words, sealed under my own lock and key. I was free. But freedom, I learned, can feel lonely. The day after the ruling, I walked through my home like a stranger visiting someone else's life. Every photo on the wall carried a different ache. Birthdays, Christmas mornings, Lydia's graduation. In each one she was smiling, and I was proud. I stopped in front of one from her wedding. I remember that day so vividly, her dress glowing in the sunlight, her father's absence felt but not spoken. I'd promised myself that I would always protect her, and she'd promised that she'd always love me. I ran my finger over her face in the frame and whispered, "You didn't have to become my enemy." The words disappeared into the quiet. That evening, Thomas called. "How are you holding up?" he asked. I smiled faintly, though he couldn't see it. "I don't even know. I should feel happy, I guess. Relieved. You should. You fought the hardest battle of your life and won." "I know," I said softly. "But winning doesn't feel like I thought it would." He sighed. "You lost someone you love. There's no victory in that. But at least now, she can't hurt you anymore." His voice was gentle, the kind of gentleness that only someone who's seen too much pain can give. I'm not sure she ever realized how much she already did. I said, "Maybe one day she will," he replied. "But don't waste your peace waiting for it." Days passed. The world outside moved on, but inside these walls, I was rebuilding in slow, quiet steps. I started tending to my garden again. The soil was cool and soft between my fingers, grounding, honest. Flowers don't lie, don't pretend. They just grow toward the sun, no matter how many storms have passed. Sometimes I'd sit on the porch with a cup of tea, listening to the birds, feeling the wind against my face. That silence, the same one that used to scare me, began to heal me instead. One afternoon, my neighbor June came by with her usual chatter. "You look different," she said, setting a pie on my table. Different how? Lighter. Like someone who's decided to live again. I smiled. Maybe I finally have. I heard about the court ruling, she said quietly. I'm so sorry you went through that, Martha. I can't imagine what it must have been like, I shrugged. It's strange. For months I thought losing my daughter would break me. But somewhere in the middle of that chaos, I found something I'd forgotten existed. What's that? Myself. She smiled softly, squeezing my hand. You've always been stronger than you think. Evenings were the hardest, though. That was when the memories came crawling back. The arguments, the tears, the betrayal replaying in flashes. Sometimes I'd catch myself waiting for the sound of her car pulling into the driveway. Waiting for her voice calling, "Mom?" But the sound never came, and maybe that was for the best. One night, as the sun dipped below the trees, I sat by the fireplace with a book I hadn't finished in years. The flames flickered against the old brick, dancing with a kind of quiet grace. I heard the mail slot click. The sound startled me. I hadn't been expecting anything. When I walked to the door, a single white envelope lay on the floor. My name was written in familiar handwriting, neat, careful, a little slanted. My heart clenched. Lydia. For a long while, I just stared at it. My fingers hovered above it, trembling slightly. A part of me, the mother in me, wanted to tear it open, to read her words, to find even one sentence that said, "I'm sorry." But another part of me, the woman who had survived everything she'd done, whispered, "Don't do it." I carried it to the fireplace, sat down and held it over the flames. The paper caught quickly, curling and blackening as the ink melted into smoke. The smell of burning ink filled the room. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. When it was gone, I whispered, "You took enough of me. You don't get to take my piece, too." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the warmth of the fire against my skin. For the first time in so long, I wasn't afraid. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. And as I sat there, watching the last ember fade, I finally let out a breath that had been trapped inside me for years. "I lost a daughter," I murmured. But I found myself again. I looked out the window. The moon hung high, bathing the garden in soft light. Somewhere deep down, I hoped she'd find her way back to the person she used to be. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back. I had survived the unthinkable, and I was alive, fully, beautifully alive. The spring air was soft that morning, the kind that smelled of lilacs and new beginnings. I stood on the small stage at our community hall, the same one where I'd once hosted bake sales and charity drives with Lydia tugging at my sleeve. This time, I was alone, but not lonely. The banner behind me read, "The Henry Wells Memorial Scholarship, supporting single mothers with integrity and hope." I took a deep breath, clutching the microphone. The crowd was small, local teachers, parents, a few reporters. Yet, as I looked around, every face reminded me of something worth fighting for: kindness, honesty, dignity. "Thank you all for being here," I began, my voice steady but warm. "This scholarship isn't just about money. It's about resilience, the kind that doesn't crumble when life tries to break you." I paused, smiling softly as a young woman in the front row held her baby close, eyes wide with gratitude. "I created this fund in memory of my late husband, Henry. He believed in second chances, in doing right even when it costs you everything. And today, I'm proud to honor that belief." Applause rippled through the room, soft but genuine. "You see," I continued, "I used to think inheritance was about wealth, the money we leave behind. But now I know inheritance is the lessons we leave behind, the kind that money can't buy and time can't erase." After the ceremony, I stepped outside. The sun was bright, and the laughter of children from the park nearby carried through the air. That sound, light, pure, reminded me of Lydia when she was little, running barefoot through the garden, her hair flying in the wind. For a moment my chest tightened, and then I saw her, standing near the edge of the crowd, half hidden behind the old oak tree, wearing a gray coat and dark sunglasses. Lydia. Her hair was shorter now. her face thinner, pale. She wasn't smiling, just watching. Our eyes met for the briefest second. Hers filled with tears that glimmered in the sunlight. She didn't move toward me. She didn't wave. She just watched. I didn't call out to her. I didn't need to. There was a silent understanding between us, one that words could never fix. A soft wind blew, carrying the scent of lilac across the courtyard. When I looked back again, she was gone. That night, I sat by my desk, writing a letter. Not to her, but for her. My pen moved slowly, my hand steady. I forgive you. Not because you asked, but because I need to. Forgiveness, my dear, isn't about forgetting. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of what was. I hope one day you find that freedom too. I signed it simply, Love. Mom. Then I folded the letter, placed it in an envelope, and locked it inside my safe. On top of it, I laid a small note, the final words I wanted her to find someday. This is the legacy you taught me to protect. As I turned off the light, I looked out the window. The moon was high again, glowing, unbothered by the darkness around it. I smiled to myself and whispered, I forgave her. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And for the first time, I felt peace not as a destination, but as a choice I made every single day. If you were in my place, would you forgive her too? Tell me in the comments below. And if my story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. Thank you for listening. And remember, some legacies aren't written in money, but in the strength to begin again.